Open up! This is whole business! The screech was sharp enough to cut glass, and it sliced through the dead-of-night silence at my lake cabin like a chainsaw. It was 3 a.m. A heavy thud, the flat of a foot against my solid oak door, punctuated the demand. I didn't move. My eyes were wide open, staring at the log ceiling my grandfather had put up 60 years ago. My heart wasn't pounding. My breathing was slow and even. But to my left and right, on the floor beside my bed, it was a different story. A low growl like the sound of distant thunder rumbled from chaos. A sharper, more guttural snarl answered from havoc. 2 Belgian Malinois, a combined 150 pounds of muscle and teeth, had gone from sleep to full threat response in less than a second. The woman screaming outside my door, the self-appointed queen of the neighborhood, thought she was asserting her authority over some schmuck who wouldn't join her little club. She had no idea she'd just declared war on a man whose entire career was built on neutralizing threats like her. Little did she know, I was about to make her life a living hell. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments, because you are not going to believe how this insane story ends. My grandfather built this cabin with his own 2 hands on a plot of land his father had bought after the Great War. It was our family sanctuary, a square of pine-scented peace on the shore of a clear, deep lake. For decades, it was one of a handful of rustic cabins tucked into the woods, connected by a simple gravel road maintained by the county. It was where I learned to fish, to identify constellations, and to appreciate the profound beauty of silence. When my grandfather passed, he left it to me, with the simple instruction, "Don't ever let anyone spoil this place, son." I'm a security consultant. Specifically, I spent 2 decades in a specialized military K9 unit before moving into the private sector, training elite K9 teams to protect high-value assets. I deal with risk assessment, threat neutralization, and strategic defense. My life is about seeing trouble coming and shutting it down before it starts. My dogs, Chaos and Havoc, aren't pets in the conventional sense. They are my partners, loyal and loving, but they are also working animals with a very specific skill set. They are trained to be calm, stable, and almost invisible until a threat is presented. Then, they become the most focused, intimidating force of nature you could ever imagine. My work is stressful and demanding, so the cabin was my decompression chamber. It was where I came to escape the world of threats and high stakes. Ironic, isn't it? The trouble started, as it often does, with the arrival of new money and misplaced ambition. The farmland adjacent to our little cluster of cabins was sold to a developer who threw up a dozen massive, beige-colored, luxury lakefront homes. They were the kind of houses with more gables than a Gothic cathedral and garages big enough to house a small naval fleet. With these houses came a new breed of neighbor, people who saw the lake not as a natural wonder, but as an accessory to their lifestyle, like a designer handbag. The undisputed monarch of this new suburban principality was a woman named Brenda. Brenda drove a gleaming white Range Rover that was always conspicuously clean, and she had a face that seemed permanently frozen in an expression of condescending disappointment. I first met her when she marched up my gravel driveway, a clipboard clutched to her chest like a holy text. She was flanked by her husband Kevin, a man whose entire demeanor screamed, "Hostage." "Hello," she announced, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "I'm Brenda, and we are so excited to be revitalizing this community." Chaos and Havoc were sitting quietly on the porch with me, their heads cocked. They didn't growl, but their stillness was an assessment. They were cataloging her. Brenda eyed them with a flash of distaste before forcing her smile back into place. "We're establishing the Lakeview Estates Homeowners Association to ensure our community maintains its property values and aesthetic standards." She pushed the clipboard at me. "It's voluntary for now, but we're hoping for full compliance to make the transition to mandatory status seamless. The initial buy-in fee and first year's dues are on this sheet." I took the papers but didn't look at them. I knew exactly what an HOA was. It was a petty dictatorship for people with too much time on their hands and an unquenchable thirst for controlling others. "No, thank you. I said politely. Brenda's smile faltered, twitching at the corners. I'm sorry. I don't think you understand. This is for the good of everyone. We're talking about standardized mailboxes, landscaping services, approved paint palettes. I understand perfectly, I said, my tone still even. But this property is not part of your Lakeview Estates development. It's been here for almost a century. We have our own way of doing things. I'm not interested in joining your association. Kevin, the husband, shuffled his feet and looked at a particularly interesting patch of gravel. Brenda's eyes narrowed. The mask of civility had slipped, revealing the steel-trap ego beneath. Well, she said, snatching the clipboard back. I'm sure you'll reconsider when you see the wonderful improvements we make. We'll be in touch. She turned on her heel and marched back to her pristine SUV, leaving a trail of Chanel No. Scent 5 and resentment in her wake. That was the opening salvo. I knew, with the certainty of a man who has studied conflict his entire life, that this was not over. She saw my refusal not as a simple choice, but as an act of rebellion. And tyrants, even suburban ones, cannot abide rebellion. I took the dogs for a long walk along the shore that evening, my grandfather's words echoing in my head. Don't ever let anyone spoil this place. It was no longer just advice. It was my mission. The first volley in Brenda's campaign of suburban warfare arrived a week later. It was a crisp, cream-colored envelope with the Lakeview Estates HOA logo embossed in gaudy gold lettering at the top. Inside was a formal-looking letter, typed in an aggressive font, informing me of my first violation. Apparently, my grandfather's old fishing boat, a 14-foot aluminum vessel that sat on a trailer next to my shed, was in violation of Bylaw 7.4, Prohibition of Unscreened Storage of Watercraft. I laughed out loud. It was a preposterous document. She had no authority, no jurisdiction. Her bylaws were as relevant to me as the traffic laws of Mars. I shredded the letter and used it as kindling for my wood stove. I thought that might be the end of Ida's pathetic attempt at intimidation that I could simply ignore. I underestimated the depths of her obsession. 2 weeks later, another envelope. This one cited a violation of Bylaw 12.1, Approved Exterior Color Palettes, regarding my cabin's dark green shutters. The letter helpfully included a paint swatch of an approved shade of beige she called Lakeside Taupe. This was followed by a warning about my vegetable garden, which apparently ran afoul of a rule requiring all landscaping to be primarily ornamental. My tomato plants, it seemed, were an affront to her aesthetic sensibilities. Each letter was more unhinged than the last. She was inventing violations, fabricating a reality where her power extended over my ancestral land. It was clear she was operating under the delusion that if she acted like she had authority, people would just give it to her. For many of the new residents, she was right. They were accustomed to such restrictions and likely saw her as a pillar of the community, a protector of their investment. To them, my rustic, non-compliant cabin was probably an eyesore. I documented everything. I saved every letter, every envelope. I started a dedicated file, just as I would for any professional threat assessment. I knew that ignoring her was a passive strategy. To truly neutralize a threat like Brenda, I needed to go on the offensive. But my offensive wouldn't be fought with angry words or petty squabbles. It would be fought with data, with evidence, and with the cold, hard letter of the law. My war room was my grandfather's old oak desk, and my primary weapon was my laptop. It was time to find out exactly who Brenda was, and where the real lines of power were drawn. My professional life had taught me that every conflict has a weak point, a vulnerability in the opponent's position. Brenda's was her arrogance. She believed she was untouchable, that her self-proclaimed authority was real. She was so busy trying to project power that she hadn't bothered to ensure she actually possessed it. This was the opening I was looking for, and I was about to drive a truck through it. The time for quiet defiance was over. It was time to start gathering my ammunition. A determined amateur is a nuisance. A determined professional is a nightmare. Brenda had mistaken me for the former, and I was about to give her a master class on what it meant to provoke the latter. My first step was reconnaissance, but not with drones or listening devices. My first stop was Old Man Henderson's cabin, a half-mile down the gravel road. Henderson was 85, sharp as a tack, and had lived on this lake longer than anyone. His family had sold off the parcel that became Lakeview Estates decades ago, a fact he now grumbled about whenever he saw a new Range Rover cruise by. I found him on his porch, mending a fishing net. I brought a flask of good whiskey and 2 glasses. After 20 minutes of small talk about the disappointing base season, I got to the point. "Henderson," I said, pouring him a generous measure. "What's the story with this new HOA?" he snorted. A dry, rattling sound. A flock of city pigeons trying to tell the hawks how to live. "That woman, Brenda, came by here a few months ago with her clipboard and her fake smile. Told her to take her rules and plant them in her own manicured garden." He took a sip of whiskey. "She thinks because her developer buddy put in a fancy sign that says Lakeview Estates, she owns the whole shoreline. But this road," he slapped his knee, "is a county road. Always has been. And your plot, and mine, and the Rileys' old place, we were all carved out long before that developer even knew this lake existed. We're not on their plat. Never were." That was it. The key piece of intel. The legal foundation of my entire case. Her HOA's authority was tied to the land defined in the developer's original plans. If my property wasn't on that plat, her association was nothing more than a glorified garden club with delusions of grandeur. "Is there a record of that?" I asked. "The original plat map?" Henderson's eyes twinkled. "County surveyor's office. Old file cabinet in the basement. Probably covered in dust. But it's there. The original survey. The property lines. Everything. That developer had to file it with the county to get his permits. Law's the law, even for rich fellas." I thanked him, finished my whiskey, and left with a clear mission. Back at my cabin, I shifted my intelligence-gathering operation into the digital realm. I have certain skills when it comes to online research. It's more than just Googling. It's about navigating public records, databases, social media archaeology, and connecting disparate pieces of information. I started with Brenda and her husband, Kevin. A few hours of digging painted a vivid picture. They had moved from a sprawling, hyper-regulated, gated community in a different state. And sure enough, Brenda hadn't just been a resident. She'd been the HOA president there too. A quick search of that community's online forum revealed a trail of digital breadcrumbs. Complaints about her tyrannical enforcement of rules, arguments over the correct shade of beige for mailboxes, and even a recall petition that had narrowly failed. She wasn't just an enthusiast, she was a serial authoritarian, a control freak, who had been run out of her last fiefdom and was now trying to build a new one from scratch. This was valuable character information, but it wasn't the smoking gun. For that, I had to follow Henderson's lead. I logged into the county's public records portal. It was archaic and clunky, a digital version of the dusty basement Henderson had described. But after an hour of methodical searching, cross-referencing names of the developer and the Lakeview Estates project name, I found it. Scanned PDF documents, grainy but legible. The covenants, conditions, and restrictions for the Lakeview Estates development. It was a 40-page document of mind-numbing legalese. But on page 3, under Article 2, property subject to this declaration, was the magic paragraph. It explicitly listed every single parcel number included in the HOA's jurisdiction. I pulled up the county's interactive parcel map in another window and began checking them, one by one. And there it was, clear as day. A neat boundary line was drawn around the dozen new luxury homes. My property, Henderson's property, and 2 other older cabins were conspicuously outside that line. We were not included. We were legally, officially, and indisputably exempt. She had been harassing me based on a complete fabrication. Either she was colossally ignorant of the legal document that formed the very basis of her organization, or she was willfully lying, hoping nobody would ever bother to check. Given my research into her past, I was betting heavily on the latter. I paid the $40 fee to download a certified digital copy of the CCRs and another $20 for a certified copy of the official county plat map. I printed them out, highlighted the relevant sections, and placed them in my file. This wasn't just kindling anymore. This was rocket fuel. Knowing Brenda's history, I anticipated she wouldn't back down just because the law was against her. People like her don't see laws. They see obstacles to be ignored or bullied into submission. Her next step would be escalation. I had to be prepared. My final phase of preparation was a physical security upgrade. I already had a decent system, but I wanted something comprehensive and undeniable. I spent the next weekend installing a series of high-definition, motion-activated security cameras. They were small, discreet, but they covered every approach to my cabin. The driveway, the front porch, the side yard, the shoreline. Each camera had night vision and, crucially, high-fidelity audio recording capabilities. I then placed small, professionally printed signs at the edge of my property, facing the road. Private property. They read in simple black letters. All activities are monitored and recorded. They were polite, legally compliant, and served as a clear warning. Any action she took on my property from this point forward would be captured, documented, and stored as evidence. The trap was set. The legal ammunition was stockpiled. The field of battle was prepared. All I had to do now was wait for the enemy to make her move, and I knew, with every fiber of my being, that she would. Her ego demanded it. She wouldn't be able to let it go. The final confrontation was inevitable, and I was going to make sure it happened on my terms, with my cameras rolling. With my arsenal of evidence, complete the certified county maps, the official HOA covenants, the file of harassing letters, it was time to move from defense to offense. A direct confrontation would be pointless. Arguing with an irrational person like Brenda is like trying to nail jello to a tree. It's messy, and you accomplish nothing. This needed to be formal, official, and backed by the implicit threat of legal force. I found a local lawyer, Sarah, a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her 40s, who specialized in property law. When I laid out the file on her conference table, a slow smile spread across her face. "Well, Mr. Johnson," she said, after reviewing the documents for just 10 minutes, "this is what we in the legal profession call a slam dunk. Your HOA president seems to be suffering from a severe case of jurisdictional overreach." She loved the meticulous documentation, the clear timeline of harassment, and the certified evidence. It made her job easy. Together, we drafted a cease and desist letter. It was a masterpiece of cold legal prose. It didn't argue or plead. It simply stated facts. It cited the specific article of the Lakeview Estates CC rupees. It listed my parcel number and confirmed it was not subject to the declaration. It referenced the official county plat map as Exhibit A. It formally demanded that Brenda and any agent of the Lakeview Estates HOA immediately cease and desist all contact, correspondence, and any form of harassment. It concluded by stating that any further violation of this notice would result in legal action, seeking damages for harassment and recovery of all legal fees. We sent it via certified mail with return receipt requested. The green signature card came back a few days later, signed in Brenda's flamboyant, self-important scrawl. She had received the message. The silence that followed was unnerving. For 2 weeks, there were no letters, no drive-bys in her white Range Rover. A part of me hoped that was the end of it, that the stark, legal reality had finally penetrated her thick skull. I should have known better. For a narcissist, being publicly corrected and legally rebuked isn't a lesson. It's a declaration of war. She wasn't retreating, she was regrouping. I started hearing whispers from Henderson. Brenda was on a rampage, within her own little kingdom. She was painting me as a hostile, dangerous recluse, a threat to the community's safety. She was using my polite, legally sound letter as proof of my aggression. Then, she found a new angle of attack: my dogs. The next call I got wasn't from Brenda, it was from the county sheriff's department. "Mr. Johnson, this is Sheriff Brody. We've received a noise complaint about excessive barking from your property." I sighed. "Sheriff, my dogs are professional working animals. They don't bark unless there's a reason." You're welcome to come by any time. Brody sounded tired, like a man who dealt with this sort of nonsense all day. He showed up an hour later. I met him on the porch. Chaos and Havoc were lying quietly at my feet. They watched the sheriff's car pull up. Their ears twitched, but they made no sound. They simply observed. These, the dogs? Brody asked, looking at the two calm, disciplined animals. That's them, I replied. I can assure you, they haven't been barking excessively. I think I know who filed the complaint. Brody nodded, a knowing look on his face. Let me guess. President of the Lakeview Estates HOA? I simply smiled. He stayed for 10 minutes. I showed him their training certifications, and by the time he left, he was shaking his head. Don't you worry, Mr. Johnson. I've got her number. Sorry to have bothered you. Brenda's attempt to use law enforcement against me had backfired. Instead of making me look bad, it had put her on the sheriff's radar as a nuisance caller. This public failure, this utter rejection of her authority by the actual authorities, is what must have finally pushed her over the edge. It brought us, full circle, to that fateful night. The silence of the lake was shattered at 3:07 a.m. by the squeal of tires on the gravel road, followed by the angry slamming of a car door. Then the first thunderous bang on my door. Open up! This is HOA business! The screech was filled with a mixture of rage and, I suspected, a healthy dose of Chardonnay. My dogs, Chaos and Havoc, instantly went from 0 to 100. But their training held. There was no frantic, panicked barking. It was a controlled, terrifying display of defensive posture. Low, rumbling growls that seemed to vibrate through the very floorboards of the cabin. They were at the door, side by side, a solid wall of canine fury, waiting for a command or a breach. I calmly got out of bed. My adrenaline was up, but my training kept me focused. My first move was to tap the master control on my bedside tablet, activating every single exterior light, turning my yard from pitch black into a floodlit stage. My second move was to bring the live feed from the front porch camera up on the screen. The view was perfect. There she was, Brenda, illuminated in glorious high-definition color, her face contorted in a mask of fury. She kicked the door again, a wild, off-balance punt with her designer espadrille. I know you're in there. You can't ignore me. Your monster dogs are a menace. This is an official HOA inspection. While my phone was connecting to the sheriff's non-emergency line, I leaned toward the intercom panel by the door. I didn't shout. I spoke in a low, calm, firm voice that I knew the camera's microphone would pick up perfectly. Brenda, you are trespassing on private property. Your actions are being recorded. The authorities have been called. Leave the premises immediately. Seeing her on the screen, screaming at my door, I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. She was destroying herself. She was single-handedly delivering me the final, irrefutable piece of evidence I needed to end her reign of terror for good. She wasn't just kicking my door. She was kicking open the door to her own destruction. And I had it all on tape. Sheriff Brody arrived in under 15 minutes, his patrol car's headlights cutting through the pre-dawn gloom. The flashing blue and red lights reflected off the side of Brenda's white Range Rover, which she had haphazardly parked, blocking half my driveway. When she saw the sheriff, her demeanor instantly shifted. The enraged harpy vanished, replaced by a quivering, terrified victim. "Oh, thank God, Sheriff!" she cried, rushing toward him with a hand clasped to her chest. "That man in there, he's unhinged. He threatened me. His vicious animals. I thought they were going to break through the door and kill me. I came here as an HOA representative to address a safety concern, and he..." Sheriff Brody held up a hand, stopping her mid-performance. He was a patient man, but it was 3:30 in the morning. His patience was visibly thin. "Ma'am, just stay by your vehicle for a moment." He walked up to my porch. I opened the door, and he could see Chaos and Havoc sitting calmly behind me, their menacing threat level having returned to 0 the moment I gave the stand-down command. They simply looked at the sheriff with placid curiosity. "Everything all right in here, Mr. Johnson?" Brody asked, his eyes scanning the scene. "Perfectly fine, Sheriff. A little loud, but otherwise fine," I said. "Would you care to step inside for a moment? I have something you need to see." I led him to the monitor, still displaying the camera feed. I have the entire incident recorded, I said. From the moment she entered my property to her enthusiastic door kicking, I hit play. We watched the recording in silence. The crystal-clear video showed Brenda's rage-fueled tirade. The audio captured every screech, every threat, every thud against my door. It captured my calm, clear warning through the intercom. And it captured her response. "Your stupid intercom can't protect you. This is my community." The camera angle even caught a perfect shot of her license plate. As the video played, I walked over to my desk and picked up the file folder. I handed Sheriff Brody the certified copy of the Lakeview Estates CCRs, with the section on property jurisdiction highlighted. I handed him the certified county plat map. Finally, I handed him the signed return receipt for the cease and desist letter my lawyer had sent her. Sheriff Brody looked at the video, then at the documents, then back at the video. A long, weary sigh escaped his lips. He had seen enough. This wasn't a he said, she said dispute. This was a mountain of undeniable, legally binding evidence on one side, and a screaming, door-kicking lunatic on the other. He handed the folder back to me. "Thank you, Mr. Johnson. You have been very thorough. I'll handle it from here." He walked back outside, his posture visibly changed. The weary, neutral cop was gone. This was now a man executing his duty based on hard evidence. "Brenda," he said, his voice now devoid of any patience, "you have the right to remain silent." Brenda's jaw dropped. The victim act evaporated, replaced by sheer disbelief. "What? Arresting me? He's the one who threatened me." "Ma'am, I have you on high-definition video committing criminal trespass. I have you on audio making threats. I have a legal document stating you were warned to stay off this property. And I have the official county record showing you have absolutely no jurisdiction here whatsoever. So yes, I'm arresting you. Turn around and place your hands behind your back." The look of utter, complete humiliation on her face was a masterpiece. Her carefully constructed world of power and authority crumbled into dust in the flashing lights of a patrol car. Her husband, Kevin, had to be called to come get the Range Rover, and the image of this defeated man, in his pajamas and robe, looking at his handcuffed wife with a mixture of fear and exhaustion, was almost pitiable. News of the 3 a.m. arrest spread through the Lakeview Estates like a shockwave. Brenda was charged with trespassing, disturbing the peace, and stalking, thanks to the documented pattern of harassment and her violation of the legal cease and desist order. An emergency HOA meeting was called for the following weekend. My lawyer, Sarah, called me. "You have to go," she said. "This is your chance to cut the head off the snake for good. Don't go in angry. Go in prepared. Present the facts and let them speak for themselves." The meeting was held in one of the oversized living rooms of a board member. The atmosphere was thick with tension. Brenda was there, out on bail, looking pale and defiant. She tried to take control immediately, launching into a rambling speech about security, property values, and uncooperative elements that threatened their community. Then it was my turn. I didn't bring a folder. I brought a laptop and a small projector. With the help of a neighbor who had always been quietly sympathetic, I projected the official county plat map onto the large beige wall. A giant red line clearly showed the boundary of their HOA. My property was a country mile outside of it. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice calm and steady, "my name is Matt Johnson. For the past 3 months, your president, Ms. Brenda, has been engaged in a campaign of harassment against me under the false pretense of HOA authority." I then showed them a slide with a photo of the CC, rupees, with the paragraph defining their legal jurisdiction highlighted. "According to your own founding document, on file with the county, your association has no legal standing regarding my property." Murmurs rippled through the room. I put up another slide, a simple list of dates and the violations she had accused me of. Finally, I looked directly at the HOA treasurer. "I have to ask," I said, "were any of your association's funds used to seek legal advice regarding me? Were member dues used to pay for the certified letters of harassment she sent me?" The treasurer turned white as a sheet. Brenda sprang to her feet. "This is slander. This is an illegal intrusion." But her power was broken. Her own members were looking at her now, not with respect, but with suspicion. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't made a threat. I had simply held up a mirror and forced them to see the truth. The queen had no clothes, and her kingdom was built on a foundation of lies. The implosion of Brenda's little empire was swift and spectacular. The revelation at the HOA meeting that she had not only been harassing a non-member, but had potentially been misusing their collective funds to do so, was the final nail in her coffin. The meek treasurer, fearing legal liability, immediately called for a full forensic audit of the HOA's finances. That audit, completed a few weeks later, revealed that Brenda had indeed used the HOA debit card for legal consultations that were, in reality, meetings with a lawyer to see if she could find a loophole to forcibly annex my property into the association. She had used their money to fund her personal vendetta. Faced with both criminal charges and a furious membership, Brenda had no choice but to resign in disgrace. She and Kevin put their house on the market less than a month later. I heard they moved to a condo in a different state tone, I hope, with a very thick rulebook for her to occupy her time with. On the legal front, things resolved just as cleanly. Faced with the undeniable video evidence, Brenda's lawyer knew a trial would be a catastrophe for her. Sarah, my lawyer, negotiated a plea bargain. Brenda pled guilty to criminal trespassing and disturbing the peace. In exchange for dropping the stalking charge, she received 2 years of probation, a significant fine, and, most importantly, a court-ordered restraining order. She is legally forbidden from coming within 500 feet of me or my property. The piece of paper is framed and sits on my grandfather's old desk, a trophy of a war I never wanted to fight but was damn sure I was going to win. The Lakeview Estates HOA didn't dissolve, but it was profoundly changed. The board was reformed with new members, reasonable people who understood the difference between community standards and petty tyranny. They drafted new, clearer bylaws based on their actual legal boundaries. The new president, a retired engineer named Tom, actually came to my door a month after the showdown. He didn't bring a clipboard, just an apology. "On behalf of the community, I'm sorry for what you went through," he said, genuinely chagrined. "Brenda misled a lot of us. What you did, well, it took guts, and you saved us from ourselves." We actually shook hands. The absurd division she had created between the old and new residents began to fade. People started waving as they drove by. The community started acting like one. My life at the cabin returned to the peaceful sanctuary it was always meant to be. The silence is back, broken only by the lapping of the lake and the chirping of crickets. The dark green shutters remain. My vegetable garden is thriving, my tomatoes plump and defiant. My old fishing boat sits proudly by the shed, ready for the next trip out on the water. My partners, Chaos and Havoc, are back to their default setting, professional loungers. They lie on the porch in a patch of sun, occasionally opening an eye to watch a squirrel, the picture of K9 tranquility. Their work is done. They met the threat, held the line, and neutralized it without ever needing to bare their teeth. They are the best kind of security, the kind that makes a fight unnecessary. Sometimes I sit on the porch in the evening, watching the sun dip below the trees, a glass of whiskey in my hand, my dogs resting at my feet. I think about my grandfather's words, "Don't ever let anyone spoil this place." It wasn't just about preserving the land or the cabin. It was about preserving the peace, the freedom, the right to be left alone. It's a right that you sometimes have to fight for. Brenda thought she could take that away with intimidation and a rule book she invented. But she learned a hard lesson. Never, ever kick the door of a man who is more patient, more prepared, and smarter than you are, especially when he has a couple of very good boys standing guard on the other side. Thank you for sticking around for my story. I'd love to hear your own crazy HOA or neighbor stories in the comments below. Take care, and always be prepared.